What's up, everybody? Welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. Well, tonight we're going to delve into, we're going to continue with the topic of building muscle in a deficit. We're going to stick on that topic because there's a lot of people getting a lot of fucking questions to me now about this, because they did see the video of Eric Helms talking about how you can basically gain muscle in a deficit, and it threw a lot of people off because they've been taught this whole time for years that you have to be in a caloric surplus in order to build muscle. Now, I want to take this one step further because there is a point where there's some confusion, and I think that, I'll be totally honest with you, I think that a lot of times the scientific community doesn't do a very good job of explaining things to where people understand it. Even though they try to relate things a lot of times, I'm sorry, they don't relate to the average person. So the average person has these take-home things that are like keywords that they listen to, and then they kind of take those keywords and kind of put it together themselves. But explaining it in a way that you can understand it makes you learn how the things really work. Like, you're not figuring it out on your own, you're learning how these things work, and the person teaching it to you or explaining it to you needs to be able to get their point across in a very common way that everybody can understand. And that's me. I'm a common person. I'm just like you guys. I'm totally like a regular person. I'm not a scientific person. I'm not super smart. I'm not a science guy. I just need to relate things technically to the way that I understand things, which is real world things and not scientific means, okay? So we talked about how, first of all, let's fix this fucking camera. I don't like that shit square. So we talked about how Eric Helms came out and said that, you can gain muscle in a deficit, and one of the ways is that your body has a lot of body fat on it. And that sounds like the most bro thing I've ever heard when he says it. And I'm like, where's the studies? Where's the science? Where's the science behind the fact that you have a bunch of excess calories on your body? So when you're consuming calories in a deficit, your body can still be in a surplus from what it has on it. I've never heard shit explained like that. And I'm like, yes, it's true, but that's so fucking bro. Like, we're talking about a negative calorie balance, meaning what you're taking in, right? A caloric deficit, people don't go, okay, well, I have 40 pounds of my fat on my body, so therefore I have this many calories. No, they don't. Caloric deficit, what they do is they go, my body takes this much to maintain, I subtract this many calories, I'm now in a deficit. They don't take their body fat into account. Like, it was fucking the most absurd thing that I heard, and I'm like, it's very bro. But here we are, scientific community acting like bros. Pay attention. So I kind of delved into why. Why is this the whole thing about calories? Why have calories been pushed so much? Why does the scientific community still say you have to be in a caloric surplus in order to gain muscle? Now, I looked at nitrogen balance, right? Because a positive nitrogen balance is important towards gaining muscle, right? So I said, okay, well, a positive nitrogen balance means that you're taking in enough protein to keep you in a positive nitrogen balance. Therefore, you are anabolic, right? You are able to build muscle. Doesn't mean you're building muscle, because your body may not be, depending on the stimulus you're giving it, etc. However, the positive nitrogen balance is important, but it's not the only thing. Muscle protein synthesis, right? It's the nitrogen actually building, or the positive nitrogen balance actually putting your body in a state to actually build muscle, right? So I'm looking at these things, I'm like, okay, this stuff all makes sense. And then I watched these doctors start talking about, well, just because you're in a positive nitrogen balance doesn't mean that you're going to build muscle. And I'm like, that's true, because you may not be stimulating the muscle enough to get growth. You may not be letting the body recover, including your central nervous system. You have to recover before you grow. They left out a bunch of variables and just spoke on like nitrogen balance. And they're like, actually, muscle protein synthesis is more important. Yeah, because that means you're building muscle. Muscle protein synthesis means you're synthesizing new muscular tissue. You're synthesizing metabolically active tissue, muscle tissue. Yes, that means you're already synthesizing. So yes, it means that you're building muscle, because that means it's already building. But what do you do to get it to build, right? You have to have a positive nitrogen balance. If you're a negative nitrogen balance, you're not going to build muscle. That's just all there is to it. You're not taking in enough protein to keep that nitrogen pool elevated. Positive nitrogen balance. That was where the confusion was. Now, I'm shocked that it takes someone like me to explain this to you, and I hope that you guys share this video, you tell people about it, you explain it, because this is where the whole calories in, calories out thing really comes from. And I haven't heard one science person yet tell you what I'm about to tell you right now. These people actually said, well, it does come down to calories, because you have to make sure you're taking in enough calories to secure that positive nitrogen balance. And I was like, again, they're not even speaking English. I'm like, what calories? They're never specific about the calories. You need certain caloric surplus in order to build muscle. Hang on, Jerry. How can you be in a surplus and deficit at the same time? Bear with me. You can be in an overall caloric deficit of 400 calories, but your protein calories, okay, that means how many grams of protein you take in, your protein calories can be in a surplus for what your body needs. Therefore, if I need 3,000 calories in order to maintain my body weight, and I take in 2,500 calories, I'm in a caloric deficit. I'm not in a surplus. Therefore, I shouldn't be able to build muscle. However, if my body needed, let's say 180 grams of protein per day to maintain the nitrogen balance, right? So it's a neutral nitrogen balance where it's not too much, it's not too little, it's neutral. If you took in 200 grams of protein, that would technically be a caloric deficit protein-wise, okay? You're still in an overall caloric deficit. That added protein puts you in a caloric surplus for protein for that specific macronutrient. That increases the nitrogen balance, increases the muscle protein synthesis, and allows you to grow muscle in an overall caloric deficit, but your protein is still higher. Check this out. How many competitive bodybuilders you know? How many strength athletes? How many athletes in general do you know, right? High level, we'll go intermediate and above, are in a caloric deficit protein-wise? I'd say almost fucking none of them. And if they were, they're losing muscle and they're fucking out of the sport. They're not doing well. So that means most people that are athletes, strength athletes in sports in general, but specifically bodybuilders in the physique sports, are constantly in a protein surplus all the fucking time. I would argue that many people are in too much of a surplus, where a lot of that protein winds up getting used for other things like gluconeogenesis for energy. And they're not even using it all to build muscle. They have plenty to build muscle, and then some that spills over into other areas. So therefore, this whole fucking time, these scientific people have been talking out the side of their fucking ass about something, making fun of people like me that were able to gain muscle in a deficit by using semantics. They were actually able to manipulate the words so that they said, well, you have to be in a caloric surplus, but we've seen people in a caloric deficit. How do they gain muscle? Well, that's not necessarily true, but you never told us that each individual macronutrient, okay, has a surplus and a deficit to it, not just the overall. So all three macronutrients together have a caloric count, right? A caloric, if you're taking in more calories than 3,000, if 3,000 was my maintenance, I'm now in a surplus. If I'm taking in 2,500, I'm now in a deficit. My overall caloric consumption can go up and down like that, and I can be either deficient in protein, or deficient in carbohydrates, or deficient in fats, or I can be in a surplus of all three, depending on what I'm taking in macronutrient-wise from those three, and I could still be in a positive or a negative calorie balance and still have those numbers work depending on where I am. So here we have something that is a lot more complicated than calories in, calories out, which I've been telling you for the last 12 fucking years on YouTube. I have been explaining to you guys, it is not that fucking simple. Now, some of you run around and subtract some calories, add some calories, you put some weight on, take some weight off. Look, I don't give a fuck. I can drop 5-10 pounds in a week, okay? Not a big fucking deal. So those of you all that are talking about your deficits, you're losing 1 pound a week, I don't give a fuck. I'm after making the body fucking change and actually growing muscle and not putting weight on. So now we take your caloric consumption that you've been doing and preaching that the scale goes up and down like that. I'm going to say, yeah, but how do I drop my body fat and gain muscle? How do I do that? I don't want the scale to go up and down. I want my body composition to change. I want to be lean. I want to look better. I want to build muscle. I want to be bigger. Whatever the case may be, not just shovel food in my face or starve myself to watch the scale go up and down. That's the basic beginners where you start. That is a beginner concept. That is a beginner way of thinking. Calories in, calories out. Once you get to intermediate, you start realizing, well, I need a little more protein. Protein I got to concentrate on because I need protein to build muscle. That's the intermediate. When you get to advanced and even beyond advanced, it's like, okay, now, how do I cause my body hormonally to shift? How do I take care of that amino acid pool, the nitrogen pool? How do I stay in a positive nitrogen balance and still lose fat that allows me to build and muscle protein synthesis to happen and allows me to build muscle in a deficit? How do I do that? Well, now I go look at my carbohydrates and say, look, I need to cut my carbohydrates back. I need to cut my fats back. I need to make sure that my body has fuel, which is the fat, and it uses those fats for fuel. But I need to maintain my muscle mass. I need to gain muscle mass. So I need to make sure that my training is in check to where I stimulate growth, which I'm sorry, just doing volume randomly because you picked some shit up out of fucking a magazine, or we don't even have magazines anymore, a forum or some dumb fucking study that had nothing to do with bodybuilding, and you start doing all that fucking volume, or you start doing your push-pull legs or whatever the fuck you do, not paying attention to actually stimulating growth and knowing how to recruit the muscle fibers in order to get the most growth. That's part of the training. Then the great part is you have to feed your body afterwards. You have to give it the building blocks, protein. You have to make sure you're in a positive nitrogen balance in order for your body to recover. Once your body has recovered, you need to stay in a positive nitrogen balance for muscle protein synthesis to happen, or the creation of new muscle tissue. So you only grow after you recover. They take that whole point of recovery and fucking do away with it. The only time they even talk about recovery is if some reason they're declining in their performance. They go, oh, I'm probably not recovering. Well, if you thought about the recovery and did it right the first time, you would have to worry about it later, and you would never have to take a deload. As a bodybuilder, you never have to take a deload. Your central nervous system should not be so shot, and your muscles should not be so shot that you can't recover and you have to take a whole week off. If you're doing that, you're not training properly and recovering properly, which means you're not growing to the extent that you could be. So now here's where the diet comes into play. You get the training in check. You get the stimulus in check. You allow your body to recover and you feed it. You feed it what it needs. It doesn't need 1,000 grams of carbohydrate. I don't care who the fuck you are. I don't care if you're 300 pounds. You don't need 1,000 grams of carbs. You don't need 500 grams of carbs. You're not 180 pounds needing 900 grams of carbs because you feel like that's what you need. If you're not gaining muscle, guess what? Carbohydrates don't build muscle. Guess what? Fats don't build muscle. Yes, the fats, you need your fats and essential fatty acids for hormone production, and the carbohydrates are actually anti-catabolic, not anabolic, because your body will use the carb before a protein for energy, which means it'll spare that protein. They're protein sparing, but without the protein, you can't grow muscle, period. End of story. So now here we are. The explanation is about as easy as I can explain so that I understand this. Hopefully you do. You eat your protein in a surplus. How much of a surplus? Get this. We got people that weigh 180 pounds eating 300 grams of protein. Jay Cutler was 300 pounds eating 270 grams of protein. That's what he ate. And he was still getting bigger and stronger. Mike Mentzer and Arthur Jones, I remember reading some of the literature they put out. And it was Arthur Jones that first put it out, and Mike Mentzer kind of confirmed it later on, that above what your body needs to keep a neutral nitrogen balance, about 5 to 10 grams of protein above that puts you in enough of a positive nitrogen balance to activate muscle protein synthesis. And it's the essential amino acids that do that. So basically, you need about 5 grams of essential amino acids more than you normally take in to maintain your muscle mass to actually gain lean tissue. Anything above that, more than likely, is going to be used for energy or stored as fat. So you don't need to be jacking your protein up 50, 60, 100 grams trying to gain muscle. That's the whole crux. That's the piece that the scientific community has been missing this entire time from explaining to us, and have been dumbing it down so that we feel like we're stupid, right? Well, we have all these other complicated things, whether it's just calories in, calories out. Science is so complicated with so many things, but yet calories are all the fucking body requires to fucking grow or shrink. Just calories, it's that simple. All the complicated processes that go on in our body just to do this. You know what a complicated process is for your finger to do that? But it only takes calories to fucking deal with. No, that's not how it works, right? So we now know. We know about the protein surplus, not overall caloric surplus, protein surplus. We have the positive nitrogen balance. We have muscle protein synthesis. We have an individual able to lose body fat, gain muscle at the same time, naturally, okay, not on drugs. Drugs changes that whole thing, and you can eat less protein and up the carbohydrates and the fats, because your body changes the nitrogen retention when you're on steroids. It allows your body to recover faster, heal faster, and grow faster. So that changes it a little bit. But when you're natural, you can still do the same things natural that people do on drugs. You can still grow into a show. I'll bet you're not going to grow 30 pounds into a show. But even if you went through your entire diet as a natural and you came in a half a pound heavier than when you started your prep, you have grown into that fucking show, which is amazing. People say it can't happen. It can happen. How does it happen? How I just fucking told you. So for the bottom line at this point, the last time I'm going to fucking run through this, please share this video. Tell everybody about it. This explains to you how this fucking works. And I guarantee there's going to be some science motherfucker wingnut out there who's going to try to complicate it even further than me because they don't want me to be right. This is how it works. I understand it. You now understand it. And yet, it sounds like I sound like a bro explaining it. You know why? Because bro is easily explainable and easily understandable. Throwing around big fucking words with dashes and numbers in them and shit, and saying all kinds of random shit that gets you off track and you can't think anymore, confuses you. It makes them feel good because they feel better than you. They feel like they're smarter than you or they're better than you because they can say these big words. But understanding the concept is all it takes to make you better in your fucking bodybuilding journey. It doesn't take learning all these fucking words. It doesn't take learning all these fucking pathways. It doesn't take learning all the coenzymes. It doesn't take any of that. All it takes is learning the concept of how these things work that I've been explaining to you. And now you know how protein works, nitrogen retention, how to gain muscle and lose fat in a deficit. And it is that fucking simple. Make sure you're eating your protein. BioStrength@gmail.com. Leave comments down below, but don't fight. BioStrength.com is a blog. It's Eat Your Protein Bicep, and we are